Welcome back to My Voice is a Weapon podcast, episode 12. And on this one, I'm gonna bring something a little more fun to talk about. I think many of the subjects that I've been bringing up are quite serious. They can be very dense at times. So, just to switch up a little bit and bring up a little bit of humor to the table. Now, I'm not. I don't know if I'm ready to bring funny stuff. I know a few jokes, but I don't see the point of doing them right now. But I do want to talk about the talent that it takes to be a comedian, because you've got to have a lot of wit in order to be able to work as a comedian. And a lot of people think that, oh man, those guys are just living life. Bill Burr, Dave Chappelle, all those household names. And we often mistake the fact that they work with something that is extremely creative, and we tend to think what kind of lifestyle those people have. But we often forget that it's not easy to be a comedian. It's not like they don't have to work hard for the craft of being funny, because there's a whole side of it. Forget about the art of knowing how to have a presence on stage, a certain pattern of a behavior, because each comedian has its quirks and the way they speak, the way they bring the funny stuff to us. It's very unique. From, for example, Joey Diaz to Dave Chappelle, you can see there are clear differences because they are very different comedians. And for us to actually think that those type of people live an easy life and they're lazy, perhaps we need to go a little deeper into what it takes to have a personality like that. Because most comedians, let me tell you this, they're funny because they can be very screwed up inside. They're like a broken toy at times. You look at them because you see a lot of shit going on sometimes. There are a few comedians that we've seen, especially now with the way that information travels as fast as it does. We can clearly see how those guys can easily do something that can be perceived as going too far, right? Either some sort of harassment claim by someone, but we've seen even worse than that, right? They've been challenging some comedians on even, I was gonna say assault charges, but that's not what it is. There are some claims that a few comedians are actually child abusers, right? And I was a little tame to use those words here, because once it goes on the air, I might have to bleep those words. Then again, I have no idea to do that, so I'll probably won't do it. However, there are a few things, certain behaviors. Some comedians sometimes they do misbehave, and it's, I guess, a natural process of a human being to sometimes do something that you won't consider very mature from someone that age. But anyway, we've got, one of the most talented comedians that I because I watch a lot of them, but one of the guys that I find very interesting to watch his segments and some of his shows is Gabriel Iglesias. Now that guy is funny as hell. And what impresses me the most is while a lot of comedians use colorful language and swear words and all of that mechanics that they use to be funny, Gabriel Iglesias knows how to do comedy without using that type of language. And I think it takes somebody very smart to know that you don't need to constantly use that type of language in order for you to be extremely funny. Now you compare Gabriel Iglesias to Bill Burr, it's night and day, right? You see Bill Burr, he's an edgy head that goes off because he's got his own insanity issues, and he has to use those curse words a lot and be colorful with the way that, but it's very different, perhaps even the personalities, because Gabriel, he's a laid-back guy, while Bill Burr seems to be someone who gets stressed out very easily, right? And I guess Bill Burr spoke candidly a couple of times about his anger issues, and that's great. And he actually realized how to use that as a tool for his shows, So he unloads a lot of that anger on stage, which is perhaps even a little bit therapeutic in some sense, because you're actually, relieving a lot of anxiety or nerves or even bad stuff that you have to deal with, either at home or on the road or whatever. Because let's not forget, for all of you that might think that comedians are lazy, let's not forget that it's kind of grueling to be on the road for a certain period of time to be able to actually put food on the table of your family. So it's quite interesting to me that we have this way of thinking, It's again, it's part of that broken system. I think that we need to start believing that perhaps people have different ways of setting up their alarm clock, and not all of us are wired to wake up at 6:30 a.m., right? I'm not wired to do that. I fucking hate mornings. I do it because I have to, It's not like I like to do it. If I could, I would wake up at 3 p.m. and I don't give a shit. But I have a schedule to follow, and if I don't, then everything gets disorganized and confusing to me. So I need to have a schedule that is, pending from morning to evening. Others don't do that. And it's not only because they don't want, it's because they don't have to. and perhaps they have to do other type of stuff. So their organization skill set works in a different way. They're wired to do things in a different perspective, and it's not like they're completely unorganized. Some people are, right? At some points of my life, I was at times very unorganized. But in some cases, it's just some people organize themselves quite differently. And we need to allow them to have the freedom to do that, because otherwise we wouldn't have any sort of entertainment in life, because it's thanks to that type of mindset that you have comedians, you have movie stars, you have rock stars. Without them, we wouldn't have entertainment at all. It would be fucking boring, right? And it would be just, God, can you imagine life without all of those people? Because I know that in a certain way, we criticize a lot of the entertainment industry these days, but it's not like it's their fault, you know. They are just there to try to entertain us. So we need to know how to handle that the proper way. So, like I said, it takes a lot of talent to actually know what to do on stage as a comedian. And I think it might be even harder for a comedian than it is for an actor to, because actors, as much as I respect their craft, they just memorize scripts. It's very rare to see an actor actually go off the script and do something amazing. There are a few cases. I know there are a few cases, but for the most part, actors are just given a script and following the script, doing that. Of course, then they add their own personality to that, which makes a great character on the movie. But with comedians, they don't have someone behind them to direct what they're doing. Sometimes a couple of comedians might have someone who writes for them, but I think especially nowadays most of them are just doing the writing for themselves. And we've seen the whole a few I think it was just over a decade ago, we've seen the whole scandal with Joe Rogan and oh god, I forgot his name. Okay, his real name apparently was Nat Holman, right? Or Holness. Nat Holness. Nat Holness, this comedian that changed his name to apparently be more connected to the Latin community in some sort of way, if that makes any sense. But the guy wasn't even Mexican. He's half Honduran, half German, as far as I understand. And his real name is Nat Holness. I can't remember the name that he uses now. I've seen a few interviews. Apparently he's coming back now, and he's doing a bunch of interviews and shows on podcasts. I saw him on the Valuetainment YouTube channel on their podcast up there, and I don't know. I still think the guy's a piece of shit. Someone that actually for years stole jokes from other comedians and made it his own, and was caught doing time in and time again. And the only guy that actually confronted him was Joe Rogan. Now, remember that at the time, Joe Rogan was not as big as he is now. You know, everybody knows Rogan from his podcast, his comedy stuff. He became mainstream from the underground, right? Rogan became, if I can say this term, I don't know if it is right, or Rogan became internet mainstream, if that makes any sense. Okay? And I guess there is a little bit of difference between the mainstream in the internet versus the mainstream in the rest of the media, just because of, you know, a little bit of conflict sets in there, you know, because Rogan became mainstream on his own because of how much people like the way he conduct himself. You know, the guy is really, he's very popular. His show has millions of downloads every episode, right? So it's hard not to respect someone that came from nothing and became successful in everything, right? Because the fact is, Joe Rogan is successful at everything that he does, and he does it because those are the things that he loves to do. He's a mixed martial artist expert, which makes it perfect for his position as a commentator at the UFC. He's a comedian, and he loves comedy. You can see it. That's probably the thing that he has the most love for professionally. Also, because he actually said a bunch of times that he's actually a fan of comedy, also a fan of mixed martial arts. But you know, I guess you have different ways of enjoying those two products. We all know he was the host for the Fear Factor, and I mean, the talent on this guy is reeking everywhere, you know. And he came from nothing. He's like one of those people that he's so smart how he manages himself that he put himself in a position where, you know, he said, fuck it, I'm not gonna have a boss around me. I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. I'm gonna manage myself, and I'm gonna be successful no matter what. And I'm someone who follows those footsteps in some way. You know, I don't want to be Joe Rogan, but I want to be myself. But I admit that, you know, he is an example that I like to follow for a bunch of different reasons. Now, that doesn't mean that I have to agree with everything that he does or he says, but it's undeniable that he's someone that has a large following, and a lot of people perhaps see him as a good example to be followed. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So, yeah, and coming back to the differences between comedians and actors or musicians, I guess because stand-up comedy really at some point only existed in the US, we had comedians on stage in other countries as well, but it wasn't as popular. It was never something that you could actually say, because that's perhaps the view of how what a comedian is today is completely different from what it was 20 years ago. When we thought of a comedian, we thought either of someone working on a TV show of some sort, or a funny actor, a comedian that works in movies that are comedic. But now the whole perception of that changed because of how comedy became built up to be stand-up comedy. And it became a presentation. And it's presented to us just like a rock concert or a theater or a movie, but in a different way, because comedians are actually acting live, you know. So the whole way of perceiving what a comedian is from then to now, it's much more, when you say that the guy's a comedian, you immediately know that what the meaning is that he's a stand-up comic. And that's actually today considered a profession, I don't know if I'm a podcaster. I'm doing this show now for it's a couple weeks already, But I don't know if I would call a someone who's a podcaster. I guess it is a profession, but it's kind of strange to call a podcaster a profession. Podcast as a profession, perhaps, because for a lot of us, I'm trying to get to the point where I can actually live working only as a podcaster, but right now that's not the case. I'm not making a living out of podcasting. It's essentially because I guess until I start getting sponsors, that's not going to be possible. And for now, I guess it's because the show is so new. I don't have any sponsors yet, but that perhaps at some point it will happen. We never know. But hey, and but in the case of comedians, they're actually professional comics, right? Comedians are now recognized as professionals in their field. It's quite ironic. Yeah. Are you a professional comedian? Would you say that being a comedian is a profession per se? That's kind of a weird question. It has some... It's kind of funny, actually. Because it doesn't sound real. But I guess it is. It is. A lot of them are actually making a living out of going up on stage and being on the road. Now, I don't know if... Well, I do know because I heard a bunch of them talking about this, but COVID has obviously affected a lot of that. And perhaps that's why a lot of them have podcasts. It's one way to, have something else in case tragedy hits. And I guess tragedy for them is not being able to perform on stage, and it's it's very interesting. It's a lighter subject to talk about. Obviously, I'm not a comedian. I can, just like everybody else, be naturally funny. In some case, say or do something that is funny. But I don't know if I would ever be able to become a comedian, because you've got to have some sort of natural talent to actually get to that point. And of course, that this is something that I hear a lot, and it's a very interesting debate, and I don't know where exactly I land on it. I don't know if I have an opinion about this, because it's quite hard to be so clear on this subject. And when you have someone who's extremely talented in what they do, right? Let me give you an example. All right, Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time, arguably, right? The greatest of all time. Now, Jordan is a mix of someone who was not only just extremely talented, but extremely hardworking and focused. That's him. But if I have to grab another example that is perhaps a little more laid back, because some of those people know that they're extremely talented, and perhaps they realize that with that amount of talent, they don't need to work as hard, so they relax a little bit. So I'm going to go to another example that of someone who has a bunch of talent, but sometimes screws up, laziness gets in the way, I guess money also gets in the way. Jon Jones, former UFC light heavyweight champion. The amount of talent on that guy and how he managed, and that's the comparison. Someone who, like Jordan, who was not just talented, but so determined to be 24/7 focused on basketball, nothing else. No parties, no. Of course, he sometimes he did party when he had his times off and everything, but you never see Michael Jordan screw up an interview. Of course, we've seen a few interviews where he can get a little bit angry, but nothing out of, not within reason, right? Well, someone like Jon Jones does things a little bit different. I think perhaps he realized how much talent he had and got a little bit cockier and allowed himself to do things that, are not approved by everybody, So, and I'm not, especially because I'm a DC fan. Daniel Cormier was my favorite fighter ever in the UFC. So I have reasons to actually hate Jon Jones. But I'm not going to come on out here and do the classic ranting on someone like that, because I actually recognize the talent that the guy has, and it's an amount of talent that is really insane. You know, you don't see that. It's such a natural talent that is brilliant, and you can only be born with that amount of talent. You know, that's not something that, you know, it doesn't matter how much work you put on. You can work very, very hard to get very far, but if you don't have that talent, you're never gonna get to the level. I'm sorry. No way. The guy's just way, way beyond talented. And there are a few guys in martial arts, some musicians, some actors, you know. So it's very interesting to compare, you know. If we go to soccer, which is a sport that I have a little more knowledge upon for obvious reasons, been born in Brazil and all, you see someone like Lionel Messi and someone like this Cristiano Ronaldo guy, and there lies the biggest differences. Messi has that natural talent, and sometimes it feels like he slips a little bit, you know. And yet Cristiano is very talented, not as much as Messi, but he's extremely focused, and the success he's got is because of hard work. On his case, I have to admit that the guy is extremely hardworking at what he does, you know. Messi also, but in a different way, because Messi, sometimes it feels that he's not, he doesn't have that anger in him that apparently some other soccer players might have, you know, that drive. We don't see that on Messi. You know, you don't see that little, you know, engine that makes you, I'm gonna kill it, you know. And you see that with certain athletes, you know, but not all of them. Jordan had a lot of that, you know. But then there are people that are extremely talented, and it's not that they're lazy, but perhaps they don't have that drive, that wanting to be there. Sometimes it feels like they don't have that. They're missing a little bit of, come on, man, wake the fuck up. And it's funny to see those differences. And I don't know, I grew up watching soccer, and my favorite club is Corinthians in Brazil, and the mentality of the supporters, the fans, those are the fans that are more crazed for people that are hardworking. They don't care if you have zero talent, as long as you're on the field and you are giving your heart out, bleeding. They don't care if you're talentless. They really don't. They really don't. They really don't care how talentless you are if you are capable of working hard, training hard, and in the field have the drive. You know, being driven is extremely important, which is quite unusual for because if you look at Brazil nowadays, it's a little bit different. It seems that they lost. It's a bit lackluster when it comes to talented soccer players, but if you think about the Brazilian national squad won 5 times the World Cup, and most of those players that won the World Cup with the national squad of Brazil are extremely talented. You know, some of them even capable of allowing themselves not to be as hardworking. I know a case, a lot of you probably don't know the name, but Romario. Jesus, what a talent. What a fucking talent. That guy, he was capable of standing near the goal and just wait for the ball to touch his feet to do things that were insane. And he would score 11 times out of 10. That's how insanely talented the guy was. He permitted himself to be lazy, not train as much. He hated training. He always said it. He always said that he didn't like to train. But the guy had the talent of someone who is just out there. You know? And now you have a squad that prides itself in hard work a lot more than talent. They rather have players that actually, you know, will launch themselves and risk being expelled from the game than guys that will try to do some sort of artistic dribbling, you know, that makes you look good. But that's funny to me. That's very interesting. I guess it's quite different from what most soccer fans, especially in Brazil, would want to see. Because you want those guys to be, you know, doing dribblings, doing some crazy passes, scoring super goals, while you have a set of fans that actually don't give a shit about that and just want you to go out there and give your all, you know. So I guess it's a broader subject than just comedy, because talent is in every space, you know, of you can find talent in anything. Even sometimes you find talent for meaningless stuff, right? So there's many ways of looking at it. Perhaps I might agree with the people that actually are driven, you know, not just talented but also driven. Because if you're just talented and you don't fight for your talent to be at its top level, then, perhaps if you're not passionate enough, whatever you're doing is never going to work, right? So you have to have a little bit of anger, to actually, fuck, I did this wrong. What's wrong with me? That's always good. It's always good to have a little bit of that side, that little voice that says, don't screw yourself, jackass. That's healthy. It's a healthy mindset, it makes you be focused. And of course, mistakes are going to be made, but you're going to know how to deal with it better than if you're just, I don't care, Because if you don't care, then why are you doing whatever it is that you do? If you're going to be careless, your talent is pointless. It really is. What's the point? If you don't care. And that's what I think. Sometimes it feels like a guy like Messi, sometimes it feels he doesn't care. He's just there, who gives a shit? I don't. Now, I'm not saying that he actually doesn't give a shit. He obviously does, because the next game he's like all over the place, right? And but sometimes it feels like he doesn't have that drive inside of him that makes him, go, come on. It feels like he's a little bit asleep, and that's why I say, I'm not saying that he's careless. I'm saying that sometimes it looks like he's careless, right? So, coming back to comedy, and comedy is that place where, how do you know if someone is, it's quite confusing actually. How do you know that a comedian is driven or is lazy? Because that's how you look at a comedian and say that he's lazy, that he's not there, he doesn't have any passion. I guess if the comedian fails to be funny on stage, then perhaps that's a sign, right? But I guess it's hard to say, because maybe he's failing, but he's driven. He's just driven the wrong way, right? He may be trying to do his best to be as funny as he can, so that the audience will actually, laugh. So he is driven, but perhaps he's just not funny. But how do you know that a comedian is not driven? That's kind of weird, right? Are comedians driven? Am I allowed to ask that question? Am I insane here? Well, maybe, but it's actually a funny way to look at this. Interesting, but funny, And I don't mean to disrespect comedians at all. Or maybe I do, because they disrespect everybody, so fuck them. It's a crazy thought process, but hey, no disrespect at all. Actually, I'm actually contemplating all of this because I'm also a fan of comedy, I like to laugh, and I like when those comedians have no boundaries and just completely disregard, because if there's a place where you're kind of allowed to be racist and offend people just because you want to, is at a comedy show. And perhaps we kind of need that sometimes, we're restraining ourselves of doing a bunch of stuff just because we feel like, we need discipline for this and for that. And sometimes, gotta say just fuck discipline. Let me live a little. But I guess, yeah, I think I'm gonna leave on this note. This was a little bit more relaxed, not so dense, and a subject that is quite interesting to in a different way as well. I think I was getting subjects that are way complex to talk about, and I allowed myself to disregard a few things on this episode. Not. Anyway, that's it, guys. Follow the podcast. Download on podbean.com, Spotify, buzzsprout.com, and I guess I'll come back tomorrow. I think. I might come back tomorrow with a couple of guests. Not sure yet, but it might happen. If it doesn't, again, I had a plan to have guests on episode 10. That got postponed, and I'm trying my best here to bring at least one of them for one of the episodes in the future. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and see you next time.